got even more details about Halloween's future. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champane, and today we have even more Halloween news to talk about that came out during the Halloween 45 convention over the weekend. Now, I was actually pretty bummed I couldn't go to this because if you guys didn't know, I've talked about it before, but I missed the H40 convention because I had tickets to it, but then I ended up getting last-second opening night screening tickets to Halloween 2018 at Salem Horror Fest, so I called an audible, I abandoned my tickets for the H40 convention, I jumped on a plane and saw Halloween 2018 super early. Not as early as the people got to see it at TIFF, but I did get to see it pretty much right after them, and that really helped the channel out. This time around, I have an even better excuse. My wedding is next week. We just have so much going on, I couldn't swing it. I didn't want to go out of town and then, God forbid, get sick while I was out of town and then come back and be sick for my wedding. Thankfully, I ended up getting the flu last week, so I'm feeling like I'll be better by next week, so everything will be good. And also, they ended up moving The Exorcist release date back just for me. It was originally going to take place on Friday the 13th, my wedding day, but they moved it back because they said, hey, we're not going to release this theatrical film on Jim's birthday, so I'm gonna go see it this weekend. But yeah, as for the weekend, it looked like it was really fun. I saw a bunch of pictures online. They actually got every single Michael Myers together. I saw John Carpenter was there on the last day. He ended up doing a surprise panel. Malek Akkad was walking around, and it seems like he's a pretty cool dude. Apparently he was hanging out with people, drinking and having a good time, so I don't feel like you could really ask for anything more than that from someone who's the overlord of Halloween. And also, I saw that there was like a screening at the bar from Halloween 3, and Tom Atkins actually showed up and watched Halloween 3 with people. So as far as that weekend goes, it seems like it was absolutely incredible. There's rumors that HorrorHound is going to put out videos of the panels, but thankfully the Slaughtered Lamb podcast put out a tweet that let us know the gist of what was said about Halloween. So the first thing Malek Akkad let us know is that they're working on some really cool stuff within the franchise. He also kind of hinted at a video game, which I will talk about more in the second half of this video because I actually know a few details about it. I'm not going to reveal everything, but I will be talking about it later in this video. He also said that the plan is to keep Halloween elevated, which is an interesting choice of words, and if everything goes according to plan, we will have an announcement by the end of this month, which, I don't know, I am just so incredibly excited that we're getting Halloween news less than a year after Halloween Ends comes out, right? Like, I thought we would have years and years and years before we heard anything about this franchise, but if you look at the history of the franchise, even when they had big bombs and had to regroup to kind of reset everything, the longest wait we definitely had was the wait between Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and Halloween 2018, and we heard that it wasn't going to be that long ever again. But with Hollywood, and especially with the strikes going on and everything like that, you never really know, and it's hard to put stock in anything you hear. But getting the news that we might get news by the end of the month, that's awesome, and I want to touch on that word elevated, right? Because when you hear elevated, yeah, I know this isn't the term that everyone likes. It's called elevated horror, but that term elevated horror was come up with to describe what A24 was putting out. Now, this was a while ago at this point. It feels like it was yesterday, but it was way back in like 2016, 2017, 2018 when they were putting out stuff like It Comes at Night, Midsummer, Hereditary, The Witch, you know, those slower paced movies that are kind of esoteric. You have to watch them a few times to figure it out, and even then you're like, man, I don't am I stupid? I don't really get this. That's at least how I experience a lot of these movies. But you know, and then some of them like Hereditary you watch again and you find little runes all over the movie that basically spell out everything that's going to happen. So sometimes you're rewarded for watching these movies twice, but for me personally, you guys know what I like. I like big tentpole style theatrical horror where people are getting cut up and there's blood everywhere and guts everywhere, and the main focus is on the villain, which is why I like Saw X so much. And yeah, that's not generally what we get from A24 outside of the stuff that we've seen recently, like Talk to Me. So yeah, basically what I think Malek Akkad was trying to hint here is that it's a done deal with A24 on TV. I've seen some people talking about them maybe get the movie rights, and I just talked about this in a couple videos, so I won't talk about it too heavily here. I just don't think that would ever really happen, right? Like, we could see them make a similar deal to what Blumhouse did with Halloween 2018, where they teamed up with Universal and they said, hey, Universal is going to fund a big chunk of this movie. They're going to handle the marketing, the distribution, and they're hiring us, Blumhouse, to actually shoot, produce, edit, actually make the movie happen, we'll join forces, and that'll actually work out pretty well for everyone involved. And it did work out really well for everyone involved with Halloween 2018. They went in just with the deal for one movie, and because of the success of Halloween 2018, they were able to make another deal for 2 more sequels, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Now, there's nothing to say A24 couldn't do the same thing, but traditionally, we haven't really seen them team up with big distributors before, right? Like, the biggest deal I think I've ever heard of them making was for the movies that they put out on DirecTV exclusively. I don't know if you've heard of any of these, but one of them was called The Black Coat's Daughter. It's actually one of my favorite A24 movies, and then the other one was from Brian Bertino, the guy who made The Strangers. He put a movie out on A24 through DirecTV called Monster, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So that was a huge deal they made back in the day when they're trying to build up their funds, but as of now, I don't really think there's really that big of an incentive for them to do that, because when you work with a distributor like Universal, they're the ones calling the shots, right? And the whole ethos of A24 is that they call the shots. They give filmmakers all the tools they need, the money, the marketing, all that, and then they let them make these incredible original movies that people go to the theater for. And because the movies are so cheap, people actually bump up the profits of these movies quite a bit. Even though they don't get mass appeal a lot of the time, enough people go see them where they make a lot of money. So knowing that they can't really afford the rights to Halloween, and the reason people are kind of thinking this way, which makes a lot of sense, is because Universal kind of just pulled Microsoft buying Bethesda, right? Like, Microsoft bought Bethesda for what was considered to be way more than they were worth, right? Like, that happened pretty soon after the Insomniac Games acquisition from Sony, which was done for like less than $1 billion, and then you have Bethesda getting bought for a lot more than that, and that kind of juiced things up. And then with Activision, they're buying Activision for like $70 billion. So when you have a big company throwing a ton of money around, that brings up the prices for all IP rights. And the same thing goes for movies, that goes for video games. So in the movie world, Universal just spent like $400 million on an Exorcist trilogy, right? Like, they said, hey, we're buying the rights for The Exorcist. We're going to at least make 2 movies. The first one is going to be theatrical. The second one, based on how the first one does, could be theatrical and Peacock, or it could be just Peacock. And depending on how that one does, that'll decide if we make the third movie at all. But because they paid $400 million for a franchise that arguably is not worth $400 million, because there's no ROI really precedent set at all with The Exorcist, other than maybe the first movie, that's going to juice up the price of something like Halloween, where Malachi could come in and say, hey guys, we just put out 3 Halloween movies. The first one's the highest grossing movie in the franchise. The second one did incredibly well, despite also releasing the same time on Peacock. And the third one also did really well in the box office, despite the fact that critics and fans alike were super divided on it. And yeah, so I want more than $400 million, because that's what The Exorcist just demanded from Universal. And that franchise has no precedent set on actually being able to make that back in at least one movie. And I'm not saying that in a good way or a bad way, that's just smart business. But when you think about it, that makes it kind of tough, at least I think, for A24 to front the money to buy the Halloween rights. So as far as TV goes, I think we're going to see a Halloween TV show, and then as time goes on, we'll see that Halloween movie coming out from either Miramax or Paramount, or a combination of the both. And honestly, I think that's fine. I looked up a lot of the comments on the video where I was talking about the TV show. A lot of people still want the Halloween 3 treatment to happen, and the longer we think about this, the more I talk about it, the less I think that's even really a possibility. But I feel like it's the best option for TV, which is kind of frustrating. The farther we get away from it, the more I think about it, the less likely I think that is to happen. The reason is I just don't know what you do with it, right? Like, your one option with it is to make a remake of Halloween 3. You spread it out, you give it more character focused moments, but then you lose a lot of the great fast paced pacing that the movie already has, and it's going to be tough to spread the kills out and make it genuinely scary. Or you say, hey, we're going to retell the story, we're going to retool it, and then immediately you lose like half the fan base, because they're going to be like, this isn't Halloween 3, you're making a completely different show and just using the Halloween 3 name, which is what we see in Hollywood over and over again, and people are just generally getting sick of it, or at least I am. I'm totally sick of that whole trend. And then the third option, of course, is the whole original idea for Halloween 3, which is to do an anthology where every year you get a new Halloween based show. That's a huge risk for a lot of reasons. First of all, the IP of Halloween, the thing that's pulling people into the theaters isn't the name Halloween, right? Like, it helps for sure to say, oh, there's a new Halloween movie, but I'd argue that the vast majority of people, like my mom, my dad, my friends who aren't super into horror movies, they're not going to say there's a new Halloween movie out. They're going to say there's a new Michael Myers movie out. So show, if you're making a new anthology show that doesn't feature Michael Myers and is focused on Halloween 3, that's not going to do a whole lot for normal people who are the people you need to show up for a TV show like this every single week. And the anthology idea can kill the show at any point, because if you're doing an anthology, it's a different show every season, different cast of characters, different story, and people are going to tune in or out based on their interest in the story, right? Like, they have nothing to go on in terms of a finale that's going to bring you back or anything like that at all. So they're going to say, hey, maybe this season of the Witch show doesn't really appeal to me this season, and a lot of people will agree with them, and then the viewership drops and the show gets canceled. So there's just so much risk in terms of making an anthology show like that I just personally don't really see it happening. But then on the other hand, you got to think about the movie and the TV that are happening around the same time. Are both going to have Michael Myers? Like, are they going to talk to each other and say, hey, A24 is making this TV show, they're going to have their own version of Michael Myers? It'd be really cool if you guys made the look consistent and put that Michael sort of in the future in whatever movie ends up happening. But then the movie people have to consider that show as canon, and they have to say, well, you know, this show had Michael looking this way or that way. We don't want people to have to watch an entire TV show to know what's going on in our theatrical film, so we're just going to use the look and nothing else. There's a lot of complications that arise there, which is the big problem with big franchise horror going to TV. Back in the day, I know it was more of a death sentence for a TV show to be made out of a movie franchise, but these days it seems like it's less bad for a TV show from a movie franchise. But Halloween is arguably, I guess, but not really, at its peak right now, right? Like, it made the most money it's ever made over the past 3 movies, and while yes, sentiment is down, Blumhouse isn't really going to be involved with this as far as we know, so there's not really anything holding it back from being as big as it was the last 3 movies. I know a lot of people think Jamie Lee Curtis was the draw bringing people in, but I disagree with that. Everyone I've talked to, whether it's the normies that I was just talking about earlier, like my mom and dad, or my best friends who actually watch horror movies, everyone talks about Michael Myers. No one really talks about Laurie Strode, and that's because he's the reason you're going out to see a Halloween movie. Now, the reason I said as far as we know when I was talking about Blumhouse is that Jason Blum has been doing interviews for The Exorcist, and of course, people asked him about Halloween, and his response was fucking weird. Like, I don't really swear on this channel all that much, but it was fucking weird. I'm not using the Loomis scream to beat that out. We're leaving that swear in because I'll just read it for you. Give me a sec. All right, when he was asked about Halloween Ends being the end, he said it was called the end. That's the end. I don't know. I've been thinking about Halloween a lot lately. I'm not so sure. I was very sure it was our last Halloween, and now, you know, I've been thinking Halloween is coming around, the actual holiday, and I don't know. It's anybody's guess. There are so many different ways you can look at this. I don't really know how to feel. I wish it was on video so I could get his intonation, you know, his intent behind this statement, but based on what I have here, there's a few different ways you can read it. The first one is maybe he has seller's remorse, right? Like, they had the rights, and even though critic consensus and fan consensus wasn't too good on Halloween Ends, they could have gone back to the table and said, look, we want to extend our deal, we want to make more movies, and I'm sure Malik Akkad and everyone else involved would have been like, hell yeah, go for it, brother, because they made so much money on this, and I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters to these people, how much money they make on these IP, right? Like, ROI is their top of the pyramid. That's the only thing they really care about, and they got a good ROI on 3 Halloween movies in a row. So if Jason Blum has some seller's remorse right now, it kind of makes sense as to why, right? Like, he was probably sitting there thinking, well, we're ending the movie, we're throwing Michael Myers in the meat grinder, that'll be the end of that. I don't know why he would think that though, because if you look at the franchise, Michael Myers has died countless times and he always comes back. I mean, Halloween 2, that is the most definitive killing of Michael Myers before Halloween Ends that we ever got. He is in a room with a bunch of explosive containers like in a video game, like in Resident Evil, right? And Loomis blows them both up. He walks out of the room, falls over, and there is fire literally shooting out the eye holes of the mask. I don't think you can get a much more definitive death than that other than throwing him in a meat grinder, which also happened. So like, if Jason Blum is sitting there like, oh, I thought I killed Michael Myers, that just shows like a weird fundamental misunderstanding of the franchise and how Michael Myers works. And I don't think Jason Blum is that that ignorant. Like, this dude built up a horror empire with movies like Paranormal Activity. He's produced so many different movies, even brought back M. Night Shyamalan's career, and he started out Jordan Peele's horror career as a producer. So I don't think this guy is this clueless maniac who has a ton of money, right? Like, I think this dude is genuinely clued into the horror genre to the point where he's putting out a Five Nights at Freddy's movie this fall. So to sit here and kind of criticize him and say, I don't think he really knew that Michael Myers would be back, I don't think that's really fair, and I don't know why people are doing that. I think it's a little disingenuous to kind of come at him like that, because for all of the faults with Halloween Ends, all he was doing was the same thing A24 is going to do with the TV show. He was giving it to an indie style filmmaker that's an out of left field choice and saying, go nuts with this franchise, do whatever you want. And if you don't think A24 is going to do the exact same thing with their Halloween TV show, you're going to be extremely disappointed when it comes out, mark my words. But yeah, in the meantime, it looks like Paramount's the one making the movie and A24 is the one making the TV show. I'm kind of glad that there was no huge announcements coming out of this thing, because I had a lot going on this weekend. If I had to drop everything, I think my fiance Kelsey would have done Michael Myers level things to me. She would have been not happy. That's the whole point. And now that we're at the end of the video, let's talk about video games a little bit. I feel so bummed that Evil Dead the game, I brought it up so many times on this channel. I've talked about it on PS Ready. I told people to go download it when it was the free PS Plus game. I did my part on getting people excited for this game, and it just apparently wasn't enough, because Saber Interactive announced that they're kind of taking a step back from the game, which really sucks, because out of all these asymmetrical horror games, that was the one that I really liked the most, because you got to play as the characters you wanted to play as all the time, right? Like, you could play as different characters from the Evil Dead movies and shows, and you could have a whole team of Ashes if you want, and it was awesome. You could fight Deadites. I mean, how much cooler does it get than that? Unfortunately, it wasn't enough though, and they shut it down, but we did get some rumors about a Scream game from Supermassive Games, who are the people behind the Dark Pictures games. They made Until Dawn, they made The Quarry, which, side note, if you haven't played The Quarry, you've got to play The Quarry. It was so damn good. And I've been saying here on the channel for months now that I really want them to start working on some horror franchises. So when people are asking what kind of Halloween game we're going to get, I'm not going to confirm it one way or the other, because I've only heard it from a couple people and I haven't really 100% confirmed it to the point where I believe it's happening. But I mean, these rumors about a Scream game from Supermassive Games, they are pretty crazy, right? Like, we're hearing that, and people have been asking about a Halloween game, and that's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, that's my Halloween update for the week. I'm also gonna do one of my horror news videos where I talk about Friday the 13th and Scream together, just because it's two small news stories that kind of go together to make a whole video. If you want to see that video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, go follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jimmy Champane. I don't know, just subscribe to the channel and set your notifications to all. I hope you also have a great week. And yeah, as always, my name is Jimmy Champane. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.